Boring books are finished by their writers, by their authors, and good books are completed by their readers, because there's space for the reader's imagination within the story.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Conversation with your host, Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you're having a glorious week. And of course, I use the word glorious because spring has well and truly arrived. The sun is shining and also it's Easter week, which means that we in the UK get a 4-day weekend. And I hope that you take the opportunity to just relax, hang out with your family and friends and also read. I've been reading so many books because I'm coming up to the end of my edits, which means that I'm able to just indulge in my books, because sometimes reading can feel a bit like work when you're a writer. And I do miss the old days when I could just pick up a book and it was just pure indulgence. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like work. You're like, oh my God, look at my TBR pile. Look at the amazing proofs that I've been privileged to receive and that I have to read and that I have to provide a quote. And sometimes I look at my TBR pile and I'm like, oh my God, I am never, ever, ever going to get through this. But as I said, right now, I'm just reading and enjoying it. I think I've read in the past week and a half, I think I've read 3 books, which is quite good. It's quite good going for me. And I started another one yesterday. So I'm quite happy. And I also have a request of you, a request to my amazing listeners who are growing every week. Can I ask, if you are enjoying this podcast, if you're enjoying the conversations that I have with my amazing guests, could you please, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, could you please leave a review? If you're listening on Spotify, please leave a review. And you can also leave a comment on Spotify, which I will see and to which I will reply. I'm not sure where else you're supposed to leave reviews. I don't know, if you're listening on YouTube Music or watching on YouTube, you can also comment or leave a comment. So that's all I have to say, my little request. And I'm going to thank you in advance. Now let's get on with the show. This week, I'm in conversation with best-selling author and playwright Greg Mosse. When you Google him, Google Books describe Greg Mosse as a writer and an encourager of writer. And I absolutely love that. And Greg Mosse is also the founder and leader of the Criterion New Writing Script Development Programme at the Criterion Theatre in London. And he's the author of the Maisie Cooper Mystery Series and the Alexandra Lamarque Thriller Series. And his new novel, The Coming Fire, is out on the 17th of July. But if you can't wait that long, you can you can read. I suppose you can listen actually if you get the audiobooks. So you can listen or read the first 2 books in the series, The Coming Storm and The Coming Darkness, featuring Alexandra Lamarque. And in our conversation, Greg Mosse and I talk about navigating class and identity in a new world, how real-life encounters inspire thrilling characters, and the art of creating vivid worlds. Now, as always, sit back or go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Greg Mosse, welcome to The Conversation.
Hi there.
I'm only laughing because Greg and I have been chatting way before I started recording this conversation.
Yes.
But Greg, I have a serious question for you before
No.
Not
Disaster.
Before we start, as we start. It won't be that bad.
Okay.
Did you know from the very beginning, from a young boy, that this is what you wanted to do?
Writing novels. Writing novels, yeah, specifically. Novels. So like most tortured adolescents, I thought probably poetry was the thing I ought to write. So I did ever such a lot of that. Then because I had a broken home life without any, structure and support, I had this idea that I would join the army. So I went to a Southeast England comprehensive school, bog standard school like the politicians talk about. And it felt like that would be both escape and direction. You know what I mean? It would be structure and purpose. And I wasn't, a very deep thinking sort of person at that time. And this was proved because very soon after I'd taken that decision, I did a school play and I happened to have a good role, and I sang this lead part in the school play, and I thought, no, I'll go to Goldsmiths College in Southeast London, I'll become an actor. those things couldn't be further apart, really, could they?
Well, they are, because, one end of the spectrum, you've got, I'm going to join the army, get myself in order. On the other hand, I'm going to do, I'll say acting, I'll say could be unreliable because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's true.
How your career's going to end up, and you'll move down to New Cross.
Yeah, but here's the thing where there is the similarity between them: structure and collegiality. Right? You're a member of, in both things. You're a member of a community, and there are, so when you're a grunt, when you're at the bottom of the chain in the army, there are, because I knew quite a lot of adults around me when I was young who were in the armed forces. Anyway, you have deadlines that are imposed from outside, right? You have objectives, and you right. Theatre is like pregnancy. There is an opening night. There is no turning back. You have to be ready. Okay, and so that sense, collegiality and community, and a real strong direction and purpose. I think so. There are similarities, but they are different too, obviously.
What was it like for you, though, moving down to Southeast London, considering where you grew up? Because it's such a contrast.
Yeah, it is a complete contrast. And in fact, in those days, you would fill out an application form for university and put down 5 courses.
Yeah.
And then you might get interviewed by 2, 3, 4 or 5 of them, depending on what they thought of your application. So I had one at Canterbury, and I had one at Hull, and I had one somewhere else. It was basically all the courses that offered a degree in drama and English, because I was still interested in literature, proper literature, the canon, right? And so I didn't want wholly drama. The first one that invited me to interview was Goldsmiths. I didn't know London very well, so I got the train up from Sussex to Victoria, and then imagine this: I got the Circle and District line out to East London to Whitechapel, and then changed onto the Southeast London Metropolitan Tube line to get to New Cross. Instead of getting the train like a normal person would, but I knew no better. At that time, this is before the Docklands Redevelopment Corporation. Pretty much the whole of Surrey Docks, Millwall, that area was breakers' yards and scrappage and dilapidated homes, right? So what happened was, there I was pretentiously on the Southeastern Metropolitan Line train, rattling along, looking out of the window, seeing this landscape so utterly different from anything that I had ever known. And I thought, this is where I must go, because it's different.
You didn't feel intimidated at all? Or you just excited by it? Yeah,
completely. Yeah, I was. I was thrilled when they sent me an achievable, set of grades that I could get, and I was pretty certain that was where I was going, and that happened like within a week. I got that offer, and so I cancelled all the other applications, and I didn't even get interviewed at all the other places. I just this one. It seemed like the right place.
Because obviously growing up in Deptford, and you talking about the breakers' yards and the scrap yards, that is like, those are my memories of actually not even just being young. Even it's only until recently, until they started building up everywhere and everything become gentrified, that all you saw was the scrappage yards. If you wanted to get a half-ball tire for your car, you just went to the scrap yard, or to get a car radio.
At one point, we lived next to a shop whose job was putting used tires on people's cars, right? And he had a special set of labels that he would glue to the flank of the tire to say, "This is not a new tire. It's not my fault if you crash." Essentially, that was what it said. And he came round one night and knocked on the door, and he said to us, "Greg, you and I think we know one another. It might be noisy tonight. I'm sorry about that, but we're breaking up a car for parts. I think you know why." I said, "Okay, Rick. Yeah, okay."
You just given me a memory. We had this neighbour. Like, we grew up, like us and the neighbours' kids. We grew up together, and the dad just suddenly disappeared, and we just thought they'd split up. Like, he and the mum had split up. That's what we thought. And he was gone for about 4 or 5 years. And then one morning, I was going out to work. So he was gone for a really long period of time. One morning, so I'm going out to work, and I just see him. And he's like, "All right, Nadine." And I'm like, "What?
Where you been?
Where you been?" They hadn't separated. He'd been in prison because he'd done a bank job.
He'd been detained at Her Majesty's pleasure.
He got detained, but we thought he just split up with the wife.
Yeah.
He had a little.
It was. I know where you're going with this. It was a completely different world, and so I was not posh in background because I come from, really horrible accommodation in a crappy rural village and tied accommodation, tied to jobs. But when I went to secondary school, I absorbed all of the trappings of the middle classes. I acquired the voice that I still have today. RP accent. Yeah. I copied my elders and betters, right? And the pathway I followed in school led me so far away from where I'd begun, because I ended up being a server in the cathedral. That? So I was an acolyte and a thurifer, carrying the incense ball on the chain and so on. And really drawn into this high church of England world, and meeting, very smart and very well educated, broadly experienced people. But I knew that I wasn't one of them. And I think that played into Southeast London. And but you were asking if it was shocking or intimidating. And it was on arrival, because when I got there was no accommodation for me. There'd been some blip in the admin. So the big tower out the front of Goldsmiths College? Yeah. I'd had a first indication that would be my student room. And then when I got there simply wasn't. Very fortunately, an actor from Chichester Festival Theatre, where I'd worked backstage as a stagehand, I happened to know was at that point living in Westcombe Park, just beyond Greenwich. And I had the phone number because he'd said, "Call me if you want to have tea or lunch or something." And very fortunately, there he was, and he put me up for the first week, and I found a room at the top of the house. And but look, Nadine, that was another really weird thing, because the room that I found was at the top of a house at the bottom of Crooms Hill. That very smart street that goes down the side of Greenwich Park. And the husband of the family in the house was a parliamentary private secretary, and the room was available because their kid had gone to Edinburgh, so it was only available term time while their kid was in Edinburgh. But there I was again, like a fish out of water, in this incredibly posh, well-connected household of the family of Shirley Britton, in fact, the Labour MP that went over to the STP. So really, really peculiar. So at the end of that first term, I was really fortunate, and I had made a couple of friends on the course, and we all got a flat together in Lewisham. And that was there I felt much more at home, on Lewisham High Street with, normal people. As it seemed to me. I don't sort of think like that anymore, because they're all normal people, really. But when you don't know much of the world, you feel easily out of place. Yeah. Can I carry on the out of place thing?
You can.
This was really dramatic. You may recall, so this is back, I can never remember if it was 79, 80 or 81. Peter Haynes' Anti-Nazi League met the National Front on Lewisham High Street on the same day we moved into the flat.
I did. My mum and dad. Yeah, my mum's always told me about that.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary that it wasn't. I'm sure there was violence, but it didn't seem so. Do you know what I mean? There was this extraordinary confrontation, but it genuinely felt like this weird, obviously inexplicable to us, confrontation of ideas. It wasn't just closed minds meeting. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
It seems different from today. Today feels like closed minds banging up against one another and no possibility of communication. Anyway, so that was Welcome to Lewisham.
Well, I'm only laughing because, I know, going back to the tyre shop, I think I know which tyre shop you were talking about.
Do you?
There's one because I may have gone there.
Go on.
One or two or three or four times.
Yeah.
They had a different name for it though, for the half-ball tyres. So they weren't completely illegal, but you could buy them.
No, I think the idea of the stickers he put on the flank, I think the idea of that was it made them legal because it was a warning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was legit. Now, I wonder if in your varied career in law and in writing, you've ever come across Winsome Pinnock, who's, I think, an important Black female contemporary writer of theatre and also some television. Does that ring a bell?
Her name rings a bell.
Okay.
But that's as far as I can go with it.
So she was on the same course as I was. It was very white, but Winsome was on the same course as I was. And in one of the options, I was doing makeup. And I remember, so I'd been taught about what we used to refer to 5 and 9. 5 and 9 are the two makeup sticks that you combine to do a skin tone, more or less, something like mine in different proportions, 5 and 9, right? And so I'd learned all this stuff and there was a plan for what I was going to do. And I was looking after about 6 or 7 people in one of the dressing rooms. And then suddenly at dress rehearsal, there was Winsome with completely different skin tone. All the things I had in front of me were utterly useless. So what am I going to do? So I said to her, I'm very sorry, I have not been prepared for this challenge. Tell me what you think would be best. So that was an eye-opener. I saw Winsome quite recently because she was at University of Kingston, I think it was. And I went with my wife, Kate Mosse, who was doing a presentation about the Women's Prize for Fiction. And Winsome was there. And then again, recently, she had a show in one of the North London theatres. And it is extraordinary. Again, I'm thinking about passing of time and how things are different today. How she was one Black person in, I don't know, 40 or something.
Yeah.
And that will never happen again at Goldsmiths College in South East London, will it?
But it's even crazy to think about happening in South East London at that time, just being 1 of 40, considering how diverse that whole area is.
Yeah. Yeah, it was clearly closed to its local community. Yeah, that pathway was closed.
Mm.
No.
There's like a lot of things. But you know what I was thinking of? You know, when you're talking about changing your accent and becoming more RP, that's basically just what we would call code switching now.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Because I didn't realise I did it until...
Yeah, but you must have done it as a lawyer. You must have been sucked into it as a lawyer to do it.
Yeah, that's when I realised I did it. But before then, I didn't realise that I'd done it. And it only dawned on me when I was in court and we're doing a trial, and then I think we were doing closing speeches, and between me and the judge and the prosecutor, the co-defendant, we've all written different things down as to what a witness has said, and I'd referred to it in the closing speech, and the judge was like, I don't think that's correct. So we had to go back and listen to the recording because we don't have a stenographer in court anymore, so it's all digitally recorded, and we had to go back and listen to it. And the clerk, she played the bit where I was questioning the witness, and I didn't recognise it was me because my voice, I was like, who is that? She's like, that's you, Miss Matheson. I'm like, that can't be me. Like, it was me. It was me. And then I was in Maidstone Crown Court, and I was in the lift going up to court, and some guys got in to the lift, obviously going up to court, members of the public, and someone asked me a question, and I just answered it. And then he said, oh, I'm so glad to hear South East London accent. And again, I hadn't realised that I do switch between, well, not even between the two, because it's completely different if I'm at home and I'm with my family. Because my mum said to me the other day, well, you don't talk with a Grenadian accent anymore. And I said, I didn't realise that I did. But then when I was at school, I'm South East London, Cockney all the way.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Is her accent fully Caribbean, like really strong? Does it have that sing-song rhythm to it?
It does. But it does. But when growing up, I never thought that she had a strong Grenadian accent. My cousins and my other family say, yeah, she does. I'm like, no, she doesn't, because it's just my mum. I didn't think she had a strong accent. And I still don't feel like she had. I don't feel like my dad has a strong accent either, even though they're back in Grenada. But I think obviously
how are they, by the way? How's the house? It has a roof on it, I'm hoping.
We have a roof. Yes, we have a roof. Thank God. It sounds like a really strange thing to say. Like, you don't realise how much you need a roof until you don't have it. And there's water coming down through the house.
Now, just following on from the accent thing and exactly what you're saying, a good friend of ours, Patterson Joseph, who's a wonderful actor.
Yes.
He's recently been in Slow Horses on TV. He was in the Willy Wonka movie and so on. Anyway, much earlier in his career in the RSC. So Patterson is also a really gifted writer. And he's written this brilliant book. And also he does this one-man stage show about Ignatius Sancho, one of the very first black people to vote in a UK election, who lived on Downing Street and owned property. And therefore he had the right to vote in the 18th century. Anyway, as part of his stage show, which is about learning about Ignatius Sancho and where he must have come from and how he lived and all the rest of it, Patterson thinks about his own home life as well and how he was brought up. And he describes really vividly through things that happened in his childhood, the division and the code switching that happened between himself and his parents. And the fact that he never learned the Creole that they would speak, in which they would speak to one another. Never, ever. So he would know odd words. He would know to say, if somebody said, "Hey, Pickney," he would know that was him.
Yeah.
But he couldn't express himself in it, you know?
But I don't think that's not unusual, because even in our household, no, because in Grenada, we say our patois, it's not the Jamaican patois. Our patois is it's basically French. So my mum would always say, when I was younger, like, she will still talk to us in patois, but we can't really speak back. So you know certain things, because there was this thing like my grandmother would say to her, like, don't teach the children the old language, because because we're here, so you need to teach them, need to speak in English. So there are things she will say to us, like, we'll understand her, so we will reply back to her.
It's a mistake, though, isn't it?
I think so. Absolutely,
there's millions and millions. I mean, literally millions, it's not hyperbole, of people who negotiate their lives in more than one language. And why not? It's not beyond us.
No, it's not.
Back in the early 80s, I became a translator and an interpreter, and I worked in French and Spanish and English. And I later went on to study at the Sorbonne, study linguistics, because I was interested, because I remained a nerd. So what I discovered was that and it's really logical when you say it out loud. Children are really well equipped, obviously, to learn the language that surrounds them, and they're totally well equipped to learn more than one language that surrounds them. But almost everybody begins to learn that capacity when they're 12, 13 years old. And what the linguists call the language acquisition device, or the language acquisition system in the brain, it begins to shut down. Which makes complete evolutionary sense, doesn't it? Because once you've learned your local language, you're done, right? So shut it down. I was very fortunate that I'm one of the relatively unusual people who learned later in life, but I don't monitor what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? I just talk.
Yeah,
I just speak French. I'm not thinking, is this right? Is this wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, I should have said that. It just, for better or worse, it comes out fluently. But that's apparently a very rare thing, because most people, that ability shuts down. Say it's why it's so mad that when the point at which we start teaching children foreign languages is the point at which there's almost no time left.
Well, it's true, because I didn't start learning English. Not English, I'm not talking about French and Spanish. I started learning Spanish when I was 11, and that's when I went to secondary school. And I started learning French when I was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Yeah, and it's difficult. The French was a little bit easier because there's certain things I knew because of my mum talking to me. But my nephews, who are they're half Japanese, and they're 2.5 and 4.5, and they speak both.
Fantastic.
Japanese and English.
Love that.
Which is great.
Yeah.
When did you I always ask this question because I always think it's interesting. When did you know that you could write, but not only write, tell a story?
So the degree at Goldsmiths was drama and English. At the end of that, I became, well, in the last year of that, as I was, taking final exams and all of that stuff, I, with a couple of other people, founded a theatre company to perform in fringe venues in South London. Right. And actually took over the management of, you may have even seen this pub, the New Tiger's Head on Lee Green. Yeah. Is one of those big traditional Victorian pubs with a ballroom upstairs with, you remember how they've got, it's like two big rooms and a set of bifold doors in the middle that sort of, and that could separate an auditorium from a stage, which was actually just the floor, but it created that sense of being a small theatre. Mm-hmm. I think we sold out at like 38 or 42 seats, which was fine. And we put on a number of shows there. And so I learnt about, finding things in skips and painting them to make a set. I learnt about actually, I was very fortunate that my grandmother had taught me to sew on her treadle sewing machine. So I could make myself, in extremis, I could make myself a costume. The smartest thing I ever made was a tailcoat, for a restoration comedy, which, I guess... You're a man of many things, Greg. It was... I was obliged, right? Because there wasn't any money to hire a costume. Yeah. Even though in those days it was much easier to hire costumes. There was a brilliant costumier on Longacre in Covent Garden. And you could go, it's moved out of town long ago, but you could go in there and you could walk up and down corridors between rows of clothes, all hanging on hangers, and you could borrow something for £2 a week or something. But still, we didn't want to spend that money, not even that money. So anyway, I also learned about lighting, which has been super valuable to me in my career several times. The point is that at first we were doing other people's scripts. Mm. And then there was like a gap in our calendar. And so I wrote something for the venue to fit that gap and performed it on my own as a one-man show. So I got, as a kind of double whammy, this idea that I could write something that had a beginning and a middle and an end, and suspense, obviously, crucially, where the climax to the script made the audience feel it was worth the journey that it took them to get there. And I had also, in parallel, I had the experience of really selling it to the audience, being that character, so writing in somebody else's voice. And today, when people, because on the wall behind me, there's lots of posters of plays that I've written and produced. When people ask me what it's like, writing dialogue where you're just constantly switching between people's like fictional character brains and everybody has to have a different way of expressing themselves and so on. I always say that it feels natural to be somebody else when I'm writing, and not just one other person, but lots of different people. So when it comes to dialogue in my novels, how lots of people say dialogue's the hardest bit. It doesn't feel like that because of all the experience I have of playwriting.
See, I've never found dialogue to be the hard bit when writing my novels. And I don't know whether it's because I have an ear.
You do?
For what people
you definitely
are saying.
do.
And I think also being a lawyer, it's all about what people say and the words they use and how they use it.
And you're listening to nuance.
Yeah,
you are listening professionally. You're listening for nuance. No, I think that's absolutely clear. You are clearly a gifted listener in that career, because that's where your sense of character comes from as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's all about what people say and the meaning behind their words. And I think the difficulty what I probably have in writing, well, I suppose is when I get my editing notes back. And my editor's like, what do they think? She does it less now because I can kind of anticipate it. But it's, what are they thinking? So it's always that prose and the internal thought process. But the actual dialogue, the conversation, I'm always happy with it. I don't think I've ever had an issue.
Good. It doesn't reading your really suspenseful writing. That's what I felt. It feels natural. All your characters feel natural, which is
I always
what you
want them to,
isn't it?
Yeah. I always want them to feel like people, like real people that you can go and sit down in a pub with, whether you're going to have a go at them or talk about, give them your darkest secrets. But I want you to have that relationship with your characters.
But you know what you were saying just then about editorial notes? Obviously I get that too, because more or less every set of editorial notes I have ever seen, the editor asks the writer to make the subtext more apparent, more clear.
Yeah.
And as writers, I know that pretty much everybody I ever talk to about this feels a reluctance to bring that subtext to the surface because, it feels cleverer for us.
It
does. If we've said it without saying it. But also, B, it's a part of the suspense, isn't it? It's a way of getting the reader to put themselves in the character's shoes and try and work out what it is that they're really thinking behind what they're saying. And I was at a festival a little while ago, and somebody asked me, we were talking about exactly this thing, and I said the third thing. So I said, boring books are finished by their writers, by their authors, and good books are completed by their readers, because there's space for the reader's imagination within the story.
Yeah.
And if everything's on the surface, that's not true anymore.
Well, no, and I don't think I'd be happy if I put everything out there, because it kind of defeats the object of creating a suspenseful novel, creating a thriller. Because I don't want everything laid out on the page for me. I want you to think of it and be your own investigator. That's what I want.
Yeah, that too. Absolutely. What about so because I write thrillers set in the future in 2037, the Coming Darkness trilogy, and because I write cozy crime, which is completely different, right? Set in 1972 in southwest Sussex, they are different in this respect, right? So I think people expect a thriller to have sort of more sustained gaps in knowledge between characters, more hidden motivations that endure for longer. Whereas the cozy crime novels, I think people expect periodic revelations that sort of reward them after like a section of the novel for their attention, and then there's another one and another one like that.
Do you find one easier to write than the other? Or is it just both the same for you in terms of the cozy and the futuristic thrillers?
So I know that you'll recognize this. They take as long as they take, right?
That's true.
And if you enjoy writing, you don't resent that it's another day. Oh, no, it's not. It's another 3 days. It's just how it is. It's just what the book requires. So I don't really think about it as easier or harder. If you're writing something with like this huge global scale, set in a future world that you have to teach the reader about, 2037, climate crisis, everything we're worried about today is much more urgent. And anyway, you've got in every scene, probably you've got something new that isn't necessarily what your reader can anticipate. You have to take a lot of trouble to keep painting in the details of this future imaginary world. Whereas the past, 1972, Southwest Sussex, I was 11. Everything that I saw then is very vivid in my memory, because 11, I had nothing in my head. So I've got these very vivid memories of all of this. The class consciousness, the vicar's role, the big house up the lane, all of that stuff. And that is genuinely easier, right? It's easier to write a novel in that setting that I know well in memory and don't even have to think about. that is easier than having to research science papers about potential future scientific and technological advances, and then imagine how they might play out in the lives of ordinary people.
I think that's why the other day I was recording a podcast, not my one, someone else's podcast, and we were talking about the books I've written, and I've written the book I self-published. I describe it as contemporary fiction, family drama, and I said I always found that easier to write, because to me, when you're writing about a family drama, contemporary life, it's like our life every single day. So you're just kind of repeating it, but you're jazzing it up in certain ways. But I always said police procedurals, even though I come from a criminal law background, it requires more work because one, it's a procedural, and I've never been a police officer. I've always been on the other side. So there's that more work in that way, trying to work out exactly how an investigation unfolds, the different parties who are involved, and literally how involved everyone is in terms of those parties. So that's where the work is harder, and where I found it a bit more, it's more intensive than if I was just writing a family drama.
I absolutely agree. I've spoken to a couple of publishers who are interested in me writing something with an aspect of procedural. And I've said, oh, that's very kind of you. No, thank you.
No, thank you. It's not easy.
What a good idea for somebody else.
It's not easy. Like, I'm always pleased when I do get feedback. And I had one from a police officer emailed me, and he goes, I just picked up your book, The Jigsaw Man, really enjoyed it. And he goes, and I have no issues with the procedure. And I was like, thank God for that. Because
it's a straitjacket. Yeah, but it's a straitjacket as well, isn't it? I know that there is this like pervasive idea that we should be absolutely faithful to correct procedure. But should we really?
I don't think you can necessarily in the sort of story. Can I always say, let's be realistic. In my story, if you had a serial killer case, you're not really solving the case in 10 days. Unless it's really, 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 the killer's so bad, you're not going to solve it in 10 days. But in my books, they're solved in 10 days.
Yeah, actually, that's a thing that I realize. The more I write, the more tempted I am to basically have nobody go to bed, nobody eat, nobody change their socks. The action is continuous.
I know, that's the thing.
But that's probably an error, isn't it? I do remember the first time I read Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, and I thought to myself, wow, I haven't done a wee yet.
They haven't etten.
No, definitely not. But of course, I don't mind that. When I was a kid, I thought the first. Obviously, I read all the books that I was told to read at school, but the first things that I read independently were, so this would be probably like 1972, 73 or so on. They would probably be like stories from slim novels of adventure from the Second World War. That was quite a big thing early on. Boys' school that I attended. And then the first thing that I really ever felt complete ownership of was The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, really?
Which wasn't fashionable then, except it was sort of bubbling under as something that, and other science fiction and fantasy like Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov.
Yeah.
I've always really respected the scientific verisimilitude, the things that they invent that make sense technologically in terms of progress. And so that really felt important to me in The Coming Darkness and The Coming Storm. And the third book that comes out this summer, The Coming Fire, that all of that should be convincing. But I never thought that I should labor it so much that it should take over from the characters who want different things and who can't resolve their differences, and so they fight.
Who does it really well?
Go on.
I think it's Michael Crichton in the Jurassic Park books.
Yeah.
And if you're just thinking about the Jurassic Park films, you're thinking, well, the books can't be that great. But the books are fantastic. And that's what I was always fascinated by with Jurassic Park is when he does the scientific reports in there. And you're like, I feel like this could be real. It doesn't feel like he's just made it up. It feels like these are actual scientific papers and this is research that they've done.
It feels really grounded.
Yeah, it does. And then you have the thriller, and that he does it so well.
Yeah. I've read others of Michael Crichton's novels, and I've found them all really inspiring in that respect. But I have to move away from all these gentlemen I've mentioned and just say that the person from whom I learned to write novels was really Kate Mosse, brackets, wife. But it is related to what we're talking about because she puts, for want of a better word, ordinary people at hinge moments in history where there's a possibility they could be completely crushed by these huge events, like the crusade against the Cathars or the persecution of the Protestants in France in the wars of religion. And yet, because she is a historical adventure writer, they triumph. At least sometimes a mitigated triumph, but they do triumph. And the world, the historical world that she'll research for a novel over perhaps 6 months of general reading and then more focused reading, as you know very well, doesn't appear on the page except in glimpses. But it makes everything true because she's done that research.
This is the thing about research, and is that you can spend you spend so much time doing the research, but you'll only probably use 0.0025% of it. That's what will appear on the page.
Yeah. So we're about to publish I've just published Murder at Sunnyview, which is the 5th cozy crime. In May, we'll publish the 6th one, which closes the story arc of the subplots for my hero, Maisie Cooper, over 6 books. And genuinely, in that entire novel, the 6th one, Murder at the Wedding, the only thing I had to research, because I'd sent her fiancé Jack away to Newcastle to do a training scheme with the Newcastle Metropolitan Police. I had to research the city of Newcastle that I've only ever visited twice, and I wanted to make it feel real, like the texture of their lives in that visit when they're together, and it's very important emotionally for them because they're in love and all of that. But at no other point did I have to research anything in 1972 for that novel. And, it feels like a really fluent way of writing. I do know that people who like to research as they go along, so not like Kate, who does it all up front and then writes like a sprinter, but more like a Tracy Chevalier, for example. So Tracy, when she wrote Girl with a Pearl Earring, she wrote the sort of first page of the book, and then she had a list of 20 things to research, and then she did that research, and then she did some more, and so on and so on. I don't think I could ever do that because I like momentum in my writing. I like to write for 3 or 4 hours a day, and in 50 days have a draft. That's what I like to do.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because obviously you're writing your plays and you don't just have one series, you've got 2 series. Actually, I've got 2 questions actually. One, did you know that they were going to be series when you decided you were going to sit down and write the Maisie Cooper?
Yes. But the reason for that is because I stopped writing plays because the lockdowns made it illegal, right? It was illegal for us to come together and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I had to do something else. And very fortunately, very luckily for me, I had recently been working with Luigi Bonomi at the Emirates Festival in Dubai, doing some brilliant outreach in the Dubai prison was one strand that we did. And then for kids in the expatriate community in Dubai, creative writing. Anyway, at the end of some events, Luigi said to me, Greg, I think you should write cozy crime. I think you'd be good at that. And if an agent ever says that to you, dear listener on Nadine's excellent podcast, if an agent says that to you, trust me, you should do it.
Listen to them.
There's no downside, is there? Just do it. Try and make the best of the opportunity. So I went away and I don't know, probably 3 or 4 weeks later, I sent him 20,000 words of possible opening to a cozy crime novel and said, "Is this what you mean?" We had discussed it, and he said yes, but not that so much, and this is a bit harsh, and so on. And he showed it to his wife, Alison Bonamy, who's also an author, Emma Orchard, who's very, very brilliant editor. Anyway, so they gave me these notes, and so I said, "Oh, yeah, I see. Right, I'll do that." By the time we came to sell the cozy crime idea of Maisie Cooper to Hodder and Stoughton, there were already 3 of them.
Oh, really?
Or sort of 2 3/4. But by the time it was signed, there were 3.
Yeah.
So they had read 2, and they knew that the 3rd one was going to be available in like a month or something. And I don't mean they were first drafts, because everything, maybe you're the same. So I write the book, then I rewrite it, and that's the 2nd draft that I show to Kate. She has ideas. I rewrite it. I show it to Luigi and Alison Bonamy. They have ideas. So it's the 4th draft that goes to the editor.
Yeah, I'm the same. No one sees that first draft other than me. But that's just for me.
Yeah, for sure.
So how much, so I want to ask you then about the planning, because you are doing the plays and you've got these 2 series.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're a planner, because I feel like you have to be. I can't see how you could manage all 3.
So I don't any longer write plays because I don't have time.
It's a lot of time.
Nadine, I do have time. I would have time to write plays because, right, a 1-act play, 55 minutes, is about 12,000 words. For a professional writer, that's not many words, right? Yeah, 12,000 words. Oh. You know, a screenplay will be 20 or 22,000 words for a 1 hour 40 movie. Yeah. A 2-hour play, probably about the same 20,000 words, maybe a little bit more. And so compared to, I don't know, your thrillers are probably 90,000. Is that right?
My editor wishes they were.
They wish.
So over.
Okay.
It's so over.
So mine are 98. Yeah, The Coming Darkness, Coming Storm, The Coming Fire, they're all 98. The cozy crime novels are all sort of 85, 87, but I've worked to keep them at the same length. Anyway, so I don't have time to produce plays, right? And if I wrote something, it would be because I wanted to put it on. It wouldn't be so it sits in a drawer. Yeah. So that's why I'm not doing that at the moment. In terms of the planning of the novels, I know that the beginning of the novel has to be a new setup that introduces the reader to a new set of characters, a new moment in time, a bunch of competing motivations, out of which somewhere around page 50, 60, there'll be a first murder, right?
Yeah.
So do you need to plan that? Or no. If you've done it 5 or 6 times already, can you write knowing that that's your first destination? Okay. And so when I've got to that first destination, I tend to stop, and not for very long, like a day, 2 days at the absolute most. And I'm thinking about it. And then I rewrite that chunk, the first 50, 60, 70 pages. And I make it coherent with the decisions that I've made about the next bit, which is sort of the next quarter of the novel and what's going to happen. So that as I write on, that first chunk is already consistent with it. And then it's easy to guess what I'll do next, isn't it? I do the same twice more. Yeah. So at a quarter, a half, and 3/4, I review what I've got and edit, so that then when I write the last quarter, the first 3/4 are consistent with all the decisions I've made for the denouement. That's my planning. It's not actually planning. It's constant review.
Listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. See, what I did, and I've only started doing this now, like the last 2 books, I think, because the more you write, you learn what works out for you, you know, what's best for you. And what I've started doing now is that, because I do plan, but I'll write the first draft, but then I won't finish the final act.
Yeah.
I'll leave it, and then I go back and then I rewrite it, and then because then in the rewrite I know exactly what's happening, and then I can finish. And that final draft, it's not hard.
Look,
that final act. Well, that's my process now.
If you were here, I would be high-fiving that, because
let's high five
in the script development program for theatre that I teach at the Criterion, in the heart of the West End, it's something I keep trying to teach, or not teach, but persuade the playwrights of. That once you've got to 3/4 of the way through your play, so that's halfway through Act 2.
Yeah.
You think about how it's all going to play out in the final quarter. Rewrite it in order to prepare for that final quarter you've just decided on. And only then, with all the momentum of all those purposeful and clever changes, should you write on and finish it. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, no, and I agree. But if you told me that, like when I first started writing, I would have been like, no, absolutely not. I need to write the whole thing from beginning to end. I can't just stop a further way to go. But I think it works better because I know exactly what's happening now.
Agreed. And in playwriting, I've written several plays in collaboration, and a good handful of musicals in collaboration with my composer partner, who's also, obviously, he couldn't be a composer of musical theatre without being a gifted writer as well.
Yeah.
And so when you're writing with people and you're sending drafts back and forth and collaborating, you can't get to the end on your own. You can't just stride off into the future. Oh, it's done now. You do have to keep reviewing things and agree at certain benchmarks and then finish it. So that's it.
Right. Before I ask you about the books, right?
Yes.
Who came to you first? Did your characters come to you first, like Maisie Cooper and Alexandra Lamarque, or was it the story? So that first book.
Yeah. So in the thrillers, the Alex Lamarque came to me because when I used to work as an interpreter, so this was in international institutions in Paris, I met people like him. I met people who were clearly spies. I've done a few events recently with Ava Glass. So my good friend and colleague, Christy Doherty, who writes as Ava Glass in the Emma Makepeace novels, which are like really thrilling, breathless spy adventures. And she talks about the fact of her experience of working within the Secret Service, not as a spy, but working within the Secret Service in London and meeting people of exactly the type you want at the center of your spy novel. So Alex came first in the thrillers, and the scene in which I saw him, it actually happens about 2/3 of the way through the book. And it's the point at which he's just begun to piece together these disparate elements that will eventually lead him to the terrible act of terror that he must prevent from happening at the end. So there's lots of compelling and interesting things happening everywhere. He's discovered that he's been betrayed by so-and-so, that job he did that he thought was the right thing to do was actually a criminal act. And he's just got to the point where he's putting together all of that, and it's beginning to come clear. And he knows that from this point on, he'll have to work in secret. So you see, that was a great sort of dramatic moment to visualize in an individual scene. Okay, so I saw him in that scene, but obviously I've got to write 2/3 of the book before I get to that scene. Otherwise it's meaningless, right? On the other hand, with the cozy crime novels, I said to Luigi, I mean, this sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Okay, well, I'm thinking of setting it in 1972 when I was 11, Southwest Sussex. And that seems like a very cozy background to me. Who do you think the hero should be? And he said, oh, you know our friend Yvette, somebody like that. And I said, fair enough. And so I constructed, out of our sense of our friend Yvette, a character who could be 34 years old in 1972, a woman, and because I wanted her to be enterprising, I gave her an older brother who's now dissipated and disappointing, but who had gone into the army from school, and she, hero worshipping, had done the same. So she'd gone into the Women's Army Reserve Corps. And because of that, she has, she's athletically capable, right?
Yeah.
She's enterprising. She's brave. She can uncouple a wagon from a tractor, because she did that with artillery and guns and so on in the army. It's like all of that makes her really interesting. And then I had this idea that her now sadly dissipated elder brother could have competed in the pentathlon at the Melbourne Olympics. And this really worked in the timeline. And of course, that meant that Maisie could have those same skills. She could ride a horse, she could use a sword, she could shoot a gun, she could swim in open water, and she could run half a mile, right? And all of those things, you can see, can't you, that even though it just came from Luigi saying someone like Yvette, as soon as you start making the web of intricacies that are the plot, and things become fixed and fruitful, and they generate more ideas. So that was how she emerged.
Okay. I love the idea of our friend Yvette, face a character, because I'm always asked are my characters based on anyone I know, and I always say no, because they're not just one person. I feel like they're made up of lots of different people, especially like my villains. They're made up of something that someone has said, or I don't know, an expression that I've seen from one of my clients. Little personality traits, and they're just they're amalgamation of so many different things, and then they form this character.
Yes. Plus, each word that you attribute to them in description or dialogue fleshes them out further, and takes them away from that fragment of inspiration. And they become real and three-dimensional, but out of your unique creative imagination.
Yeah, that's what you always want. You want them to come across as being fully dimensional. You don't want them to be flat at all. And I think that's always the thing when you're writing, whether you're writing procedurals or cozy crime. I think people have an idea of how a character is supposed to be, and if you just stick with that, they then become flat characters.
I was very fortunate that I went with Kate. We were invited to the Gaul Literary Festival in Sri Lanka, which was
was that amazing?
Really
I saw your pictures.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's I've been to a few places in the tropics, and it was like super hot. It was quite humid, but it didn't feel oppressive like it's felt oppressive in other tropical locations like Cairns in Australia or in the Middle East. And anyway, it was a wonderful trip and absolutely delighted. I did this panel on dystopian fiction, and for the first time ever, I read to the audience from the beginning of The Coming Fire that comes out in July.
Yeah.
And The Coming Fire starts with a little prologue, which is the very first glimpse of the ultimate baddie in the trilogy of novels. So in video game terms, he's the big boss, the one that you confront at the very end, okay? And it's quite unsettling when after that people come up to you and they say that character, he's very compelling, or he's very interesting, or I'd like to know more about him. And I'm thinking, no, he's the baddie, man. He's terrible.
This is how I want to ask you about The Coming Fire. But this is how I felt with Olivier in The Jigsaw Man. I'm like, he's the serial killer. He's the worst. He's like, out of the two of them, between him and the copycat, he's the worst of the worst. He's not a nice person. Even though I made him, he's charismatic. He's got all these he's got these qualities, which obviously appeal to people, appeal to readers, because I get so many messages. When is he coming back? When is he coming back? I really like Olivier. And I'm like, you're not meant to like, this is not a man you invite into your house.
No, it's true. It is absolutely true. And isn't it, wasn't it in John Milton's Paradise Lost that it was said for the first time that the devil's the most interesting character?
Yeah.
Satan is more interesting than God and Christ and so on. So
what can you do? What can you do? But what you can do, Greg,
keep writing.
Actually, you can keep writing. So, Greg, do you want to tell the listeners can't speak. Would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about The Coming Fire? And then I'll ask you about Maisie Cooper's book 7.
Yeah, okay. So The Coming Fire is the conclusion to the trilogy that began with The Coming Darkness. At the end of The Coming Darkness, Alex, obviously, because it's a thriller with a hero, he undoes the worst of the terrorists' objectives. In The Coming Storm, the second novel, he endures horrible loss because the team of people around him is decimated by a storm of further attacks. In The Coming Fire, he has finally tracked down the big baddie, the big boss, who he must ultimately defeat if he's going to stop the worst things occurring. Unfortunately, it seems that he's too late. So that's the trilogy of thrillers, right? The sixth Maisie Cooper novel comes out in May, and it closes, as I was saying earlier, the two big subplots that evolve over 6 books. And I've been commissioned by Hodder to write 2 books in a new series, but in the same world. And so what we've done is there's a character who's 16 years old, Zoe, in the Maisie Cooper books, and she is the hero 40 years later of the French bookshop murder, which takes place, therefore, more or less in the present day. And Maisie is now quite elderly, well, not super elderly, but she's 74 or so years old, and she's in the background. And Zoe is the protagonist in this new series of contemporary novels, but very much in the same style of a classical puzzle, cozy whodunit.
Yeah, this is just because of the comic book nerd in me. Automatically, that brings me to Batman Beyond, where Bruce, in Batman Beyond, it's in the future, and there's a new Batman, Terry, who's this young kid. I think he's supposed to be like 17, but the original Batman, Bruce Wayne, is now like in his 70s, but he's just in the background now.
I love that.
Him. I love it.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
It's like it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where everything can be linked, but they can be standalone stories.
Yeah.
But in the broader universe, they're linked. And I've done that a lot in my plays. I have plays that have where so and so in this play is actually the uncle of so and so in that play.
But I like that.
It's great. It's so satisfying. I mean, I love it. In Murder at the Wedding, the 6th Maisie Cooper, I love the fact that we are closing a 6-book arc in 2 of the subplots, as well as resolving, a single identify the murderer suspenseful chase in the 1 book. What's
next for you, though, in terms of thrillers? So after you've completed the Alex Lamarque series or the trilogy?
Well, obviously, if the publisher, Moonflower Books, which is a brilliant indie publisher, asked me to write another one, I know exactly what that would be. But, that depends on how well the 3rd one in the trilogy goes.
Yeah.
I've also got another novel that I've plotted I don't know if this is useful, but I've plotted it in my head, and I can see several scenes from it, and I know the overall shape of it, but I can't talk about that because I've not sold it to anybody yet. So it's like a back burner project. That I hope that the 2 new Zoe Pascal novels. I'm just editing the French bookshop murder, and I'm simultaneously, which sounds a bit mad, doesn't it? I'm simultaneously writing the 2nd one, which is the French chateau murder. And I hope that I hope that Hodder want more of those. So, I'm keeping all the balls juggling in the air at the moment.
I have a question before I go on to your last set of questions. How, because you do all of these things, and you've got you've got the workshops, and you talk about being in Dubai. How important is it it's just like, I suppose, advice for writers, especially new writers. How important is it for them to have a community of some sort?
Well, I'm obviously super lucky that I have Kate Mosse, who is, you may have heard me say before, the wave that I surf.
Yeah.
So, that's That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Then, because I am every fortnight, I have a workshop at the Criterion where I'm in the company of mid-career playwrights of diverse backgrounds and ages, and we're all working together like a TV writer's room to develop each person's new play. So that's incredibly satisfying and keeps me practicing the knack of invention, which is so important for being a writer. You know, you must be the same. You're never scared of the blank page, are you? The blank page is an opportunity for a new thing to happen, right?
It's like having a new notebook. It's like I get to fill it and just, there's so much freedom there.
Exactly. So, I have obviously. So I've got my wife who's trapped in my house; she can't get away from me, and I have this regular thing. If I didn't have those things, I would seek out writers' groups, more than one, in order to have a broad set of things to be talking about at least once a week, so that, like I say, I'm constantly thinking about invention and connection, new things to happen that are meaningful because of the other things we made up last week. You know, that process, and being as involved in that process as possible. But the other side of it, of course, is that I need to be completely on my own between 6:30 and 10 o'clock each day. I'm just pointing into the corner of my study, in that chair over there with my laptop on my lap, on one of those terrible trays with a beanbag on the back of it, so it sits on my knees, and literally I need to be there 6 days out of 7 every week from 6:30 until 10 o'clock in order to get all these things done.
Yeah. And
when that doesn't happen, like I've recently been away to 2 festivals, I become itchy and frustrated because the routine is failing and I need to get back to it.
I only realised this about myself maybe like in the last couple of years. I'm not someone who likes my routine being disrupted, because if it's and I thought I'll be, be spontaneous, go with the flow, but I'm like, no, I do actually like structure and I like knowing what I'm doing. And when it's interrupted by something, and it throws me out, and it takes me a while to get back into. Yeah.
So I know you'll be able to imagine this. In the French bookshop Murder, one of the editorial notes I've got is a really good editorial note, which is there's people in the village begin to suspect that Zoe is behind that murder that happens, page 60 or whatever it is. And the editor has asked me to go through, as I go through the whole manuscript, to try and make it clearer when people are giving her sideways looks and not answering with a smile and all of that.
Yeah.
Now, you can't do that. Like, I've got half an hour, I'll do a bit of that.
No.
You need these long stretches because otherwise you're going to make it like really clunky and on the nose and too noisy, or you'll do it and it won't be visible enough. You need to be making clever, subtle judgments page after page.
Yeah.
So you need those long stretches.
You do. Right. So, Greg, first question. Are you an introvert or extrovert, or a hybrid of the two?
So just for this occasion, talking to you, I have agreed to be an extrovert, but I'm not normally.
You're not normally. What are you normally?
Introvert, obviously.
Okay. So what challenge?
How about extrovert in small, manageable doses? Okay.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
What challenge or experience, and I always feel I have to say this now, it could be a good one, it doesn't have to be a end of the world one, but what challenge or experience in your life shaped you the most?
Well, it was 2 things that we've talked about. It was firstly the fact of moving from, as we say in French, feutré, felted, soft, easy, southwest Sussex, even coming from poverty, to like that much more vivid, bit dog-eat-dog, racism, poverty of Southeast London.
Yeah.
So that homophobia as well, let's not forget. And then the second one was when I got fed up with fringe theatre in London and not being able to live on it. And on the spur of the moment, I went to Victoria Coach Station and got on the bus to Paris and started a new life. The night bus to Paris. Yeah. Arrived in Place Stalingrad in northeast Paris, 7 o'clock in the morning, bought a cup of coffee, thought, I live here now. And I was still there for like 4 years later.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's a bit going into politics now. Isn't it amazing there was a time when we could do that? Like one of my best friends, she just picked up and moved to Barcelona. And she was there for 3 to 4 years.
You're thinking about Brexit?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the thing. I am old enough.
Are you pre-Brexit?
I'm pre-European Union.
Yeah, pre-EU.
Yeah. So when I arrived, once I'd been there for a little while, in order to have a proper job, I had to go to the police station and get a carte de séjour and buy a timbre fiscal, which is like a postal order, which seemed to me incredibly expensive because it was like £7.50. It was very expensive for the money that I had, and in order to have the right to work. So there wasn't. So this was, I mean, you're right today. Everything you're saying today, it's a shame that people cannot do that, especially young people. But yes, it was far enough ago that it was before freedom of movement.
Did the whole Brexit thing, how did it affect plays? Did it affect it in any way?
Yeah, the big thing in theatre is being able to invite foreign nationals to come and work in the UK. Like It's a whole rigmarole, and it completely changes the deal of the cards and makes it much harder.
How annoying!
It's really big in opera. I have friends who are big fans of opera who have sponsored young performers, in particular from South Africa, and that's become so much harder that a couple of them now live in Switzerland rather than London, and therefore don't perform in the UK. Because it was so difficult. And that's just mad, isn't it?
It is. It's mad and frustrating in so many things. Okay, so Greg, if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it will be the advice that I used to give myself all the time, which was, it'll probably be all right.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. Whatever I did, like decisions I made, it'll probably be all right. I'll give you an example. I had, this is like sort of 3.5 years into living in Paris. I decided to start learning Arabic, and I wanted to extend what I could do as an interpreter, even if it was at quite a low level. And I was planning to move to Morocco. I wasn't sure exactly where, but probably Casablanca, and where there's also French, obviously. So I thought I could be useful, see the world, get a new job, learn new things, etc. And the only thing of real importance in my life then occurred. I had to come back to the UK in order for my mother's birthday. It was quite And I got off the plane at Gatwick, and I got onto a train and I sat opposite Kate Mosse, who had been my girlfriend very happily for me when I was at school. And then we gone to university in different separate ways, and I'd gone abroad. But there she was again. And nothing else of importance have I ever done except sit on that seat on that train on that day.
Wow.
And you see, so that meant that I abandoned that whole North African adventure and Arabic language. But because it really genuinely was my approach, which was, it will probably be all right. I didn't feel like I was sacrificing anything. I was doing the next thing that was the right thing to do. So that's the advice.
That is great. My advice has always been, just see what happens.
Yeah, there you
I'm
go.
like, what's the word? Just see what happens.
See what happens.
Which is why sometimes I end up in lots of situations. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But normally...
That's too late then.
It's far too late. Before I go into your very last question, it's my little extra one now. What piece of advice what is your non-writing advice to writers?
Oh, non-writing advice. Well, you won't be surprised to hear that it's, even though people can be very annoying, do try your best to be nice to people.
Yes.
Right? Just try your best to be nice to people. I meet people who support Trump, and it's tough. It's not easy to be nice to them, given the consequences of the thing that they're supporting. But the reason that they support Trump, the reasons are like huge and complicated, and they're out of background and the experience and so on, and they're wrong, but do try and be nice to them, and maybe there will be a middle ground found.
My nice advice was what I told the baby lawyers. I'm like, be nice to everyone. Be nice. You're not above anyone just because you're a lawyer. So just be nice to everyone. Okay, so finally,
yes.
What? No, this is even wrong. I don't know what I've got written down. Finally, finally, let's get back on track. Finally, where can listeners of the conversation find you online?
Oh, well, I have a website which is gregmosse.com. Almost everything in my life is just my name. That said, I don't run a brilliant podcast like you do, or do anything like that. I love meeting authors at festivals, so I do quite a few of those. But I'm probably the best version of me is the one in the books. so read the books. Read the books.
Oh, can I ask you another question before we go?
Yeah.
Do you know, obviously, when you're writing plays and being in a theatre, so I feel like it's all about the reviews, what those first reviews are going to be. Do you read your book reviews? Do you have that same, like, I need to know what the reviews are thinking?
I absolutely never do. And if ever I come across them, I move on as quickly as possible, because you'll never be happy, will you? You can read a good review. You'll only remember the one quibble. It's right. And that thing we were saying just now. So I sent the 4th version of my new novel to the editor, who has some ideas. So I change it again, 5th draft.
Yeah.
And then she has some more ideas, so like more detailed ones. So I change it again, 6th draft. Then it goes to the copy editor, who points out some stupid things that I've said, and I fix those. 7th draft, right? And then somebody reads it on the bus on the way home from work and posts a review. Come on. I know what the book is worth, right? I don't.
I remember I get really sarky, not online, but someone emailed me or sent a DM about, basically reviewing the book, and something which they didn't agree with or what they thought was wrong. And my response, in my head, was, what do you want me to do about it? Like, there's nothing I can do about it. And even if there was something I could do about it, I wouldn't change it anyway. So off you go.
I actually had the experience with a play that I wrote with a co-writer at the 100-year commemoration of the end of the First World War, the armistice. So it was a play set in the trenches in 1918. And somebody wrote to me, so there was this bit where one of the characters, their glasses are broken, and somebody else goes out, sees this corpse in no man's land, and goes out to get the reading glasses off the corpse and bring them back. And somebody wrote to me to say that would never happen. And so I sent them the documentary evidence, the story that I had stole it from.
Did they reply?
No, of course not.
Right? I'm still waiting.
But, dude, I stole this story from real life, and you're telling me it would never have happened. Come on.
I didn't. I'm going to let you go. But my equivalent of that is, obviously, the first book is set. It starts by the river, and the River Thames. And it's a woman. I woke up on a Sunday morning, and she emailed me. So it's an email. It's not like it was a Amazon review. And she goes, "I really enjoyed the Jigsaw Man. But, what you said about rivers is incorrect." I'm like, what's she talking about? She goes, rivers don't have tides. I'm like, what is she? I know. So obviously I said, it's low tide, and Henley and Ramuta, they're walking along the riverbank, which you can do. You can literally, say almost, you can almost walk from Deptford to Greenwich along the riverbank at low tide. And I'm like, what is she banging? And I thought, no, because I'm like, I live by the river. I grew up by the river. It's the Thames. Yep. It has tides. And I emailed her back. I went, thank you so much. Glad you enjoyed it. But it's the River Thames is a tidal river. It has low tides and it has high tides. Yeah. So, thank you. But you're wrong. She didn't come back to me. She didn't say, I made the mistake, because I don't know. She was in America, so I don't know if she was thinking, I don't know if the Mississippi River is not a tidal river. I don't think.
Well, it is by the time you get down to New Orleans, isn't it? It isn't in, as it comes down through Missouri, it won't, and Mississippi it won't be, but
maybe she was in Missouri anyway, but she didn't come back to me, Greg. Did not come back to me. Oh well, I'll get over it.
Yeah.
One day
you'll pull through.
I'll pull through. We'll both pull through. Well, yeah. Greg, that just leaves me to say, Greg Mosse, thank you very much for being part of the conversation.
It's completely been my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.